You're listening to a 4x4 Radio Network podcast.
Hey Jeepers, welcome to another On the Trail with Kevin and Scott. That's right, not only is it December 15th, show 107, but it's also that magical time of year when my jokes continue to be terrible, and we deck the hall with the Yule log, and mistletoe, and garland, and all kinds of stuff. Did I get that wrong?
Not in this house.
What, don't you put the Yule log in the fire?
I don't have a fireplace. This is freaking Florida.
Whoops, be right back.
No, the only place we do any burning's in the pile outside, and it's still 80 degrees.
If Susan asks about the Yule log inside the cardboard box pushed up against the wall, don't worry about it. I think I didn't put it on fire. But with that
would be good.
I am Kevin, the slapstick parts guy, on a continual mission to make Kevin go, why am I doing this
You
with
are
this
Kevin?
weirdo? I am Scott, that keeps continually forgetting my name. As you can tell, this is December 15th, and I have not hit the eggnog yet, narf, but I'm probably going to soon. Thank you for bringing back the Animaniacs. So with that, as I will share with you the ramblings of an insane mind, I will also share with the fact that my co-host, Kevin, is the engineer. Kevin, take it away.
Good God. How much has he had to drink already?
The
Oh,
Patreons are getting the best view right now. They're going, wow. Wow.
and I do this voluntarily with him. Hey guys, I'm Kevin. As he mentioned, I'm the engineer, the guy who does research, reads instructions, uses the correct tools, and I actually even follow those instructions most of the time.
Like a torque wrench.
He is on a roll. We could not script and plan this crap. Nobody would believe it.
See, remember, this is the how. Okay, but while we will share what we talked about that already, we covered
we
this.
will share what worked. Well, let me put it. I'll share with you what worked for me, and I'll even share what didn't, because that's probably more important. It's up to you. Please do your research. Okay, read the instructions, and then most importantly, once you've read them,
Follow them.
follow them. Please.
I will be serious with that because that is a very serious, important topic to bring up. Because as much as the ramblings I do, in all honesty, let's be honest, kids, you are here for Kevin's tech, insightfulness, and the ability to problem solve and do those kind of things because he is a craftsman, and we're going to delve into this. And you guys also know that I'm the one with the slapstick fart jokes. So this is a really good yin and yang balancing out podcast.
If you say so. It would go along a lot better if you could make that solemn proclamation without breaking into histrionics afterwards.
Solemn proclamation.
Well, you dropped into that real serious politician voice.
Kids, just so you know, I want to talk to you right now about the dangers of flatulent giraffes and the danger they pose with the methane emissions that I'm
Particularly
grasping.
at concerts where everybody's holding up their butane lighters. Because they're up that high.
That's why I'm sitting there. Oh, man. So, guys, we really do have a Jeep topic for this Jeep podcast.
Yeah, we do.
So that
We have several, in fact, but
You know, and since this is the December 15th show 107, like we talked about.
Yeah, you were supposed to wear the green shirt. I have the red shirt, and somehow you wore the gray.
Hold on, I'll make it green.
Oh, God.
Okay, anyway, so he doesn't want to play anymore with me, kids. No, we always talk about the very interesting things and about how the internet, again, the plethora of information and fun that it is. I thought of something. So like Christmas, when we all sit there when we're young and we go to meet Santa at the mall, because it's one of his...
Can't do that right now. You got to stay 6 feet away or in a glass cube.
Well, now when you stare up at the plexiglass wall that behind Santa, or in front of Santa, for that fact, sometimes, as we all do when we first meet Santa, usually we all cry and scream and in terror. So, are we opposed on a visceral level? Am I using the right word there? Because you know me, I screw words up all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's opposed
I
to
have
meet
no
our heroes.
idea with what you're saying, where you're going with this. I can't comment yet.
Well, we're scared about meeting our heroes.
Okay.
Santa we put on a pedestal. That's meeting your hero.
Okay.
And it's very interesting because watching an old TV program you all may have heard. It's called Top Gear. They talked about meeting your heroes. The cars you had on your bedroom wall as a kid, the Lamborghini, 450s or F450s. Or sorry, the Ferrari F450s. Wow, I just lost all street cred with the car crowd.
Lamborghini Countach.
Yes, Lamborghini Countach, the Porsche Carreras, and all these cars you see on your bedroom wall in the early 80s and 70s and 60s. Like I love the 69 Dodge Charger, one of my dream cars. But I know that's an American muscle car. It's going to handle like a boat, and it's compared to now, it's not very fast, not very comfortable.
It was a whopping 270 horsepower.
Yeah, I mean, are
Published.
they great? Again, nostalgia. So that kind of got me thinking because, again, on the interwebs, there was a conversation about the Jeep Gladiator. And about how it was towing something, and this guy went into a long diatribe about how it's not a real truck. He hauled over a ton of gravel in his J10, and that if it wasn't a two-door J10 pickup truck, it was literally, and I'm sorry for using a naughty word, crap. I hope I can say that word. And should I in all honesty, should I bleep that out or leave that in?
No, I think that's a legitimate term.
Okay, so basically,
It was rubbish, was the implication.
I'll go with that. So if it jumps cuts, I use the word rubbish. Okay. So if it didn't haul a ton of gravel, it's rubbish. Okay.
No, I find that interesting, and I saw the same post, and I'm going, you may have carried a ton of gravel in a J10,
Right.
but you damaged it. You just won't admit it.
Yeah. And so the guy,
Because that was a half-ton pickup.
because I won't go into the diatribe of the conversation too much, I stayed out of it. I watched a good friend of ours basically say, oh, so you're saying if it's not a CJ, it's junk, and the whole 9 yards. Some of us like to have the newer vehicles. Some of us like to have a vehicle we get out and starts every day. I'm like, you sure you got a Jeep? The point is that, yes, new vehicles have problems. I'm not going to lie. My business is new vehicles having problems. I'll be honest with you. And 27 years doing parts, there is no new vehicle without problems. They all do. And I'm sorry. That's
It's
just
a
the
fact
truth.
of life that a lot of the manufacturers use the public as their true final test facility.
Oh, yeah, because who's else going to beat something like a rented mule and take it beyond the capabilities of the vehicle?
Yeah.
But again, back to the story at hand is that it got me thinking. Like I grew up, I was born in 75. So I really started to really get excited about, I know. I really started to get excited in cars, 84, 85, and, okay, oh, wow, 83 Celebrity. Yeah, I didn't really have the car culture like the other kids did. But I remember seeing the AMC Ramblers, the Ford Falcons.
I had one of those.
Oh, yeah. I grew up loving the symmetry of the passenger compartments in the middle and the hood and the trunk are the same length. I love that symmetry. So looking at all these cars I grew up with, I don't really have a whole lot of heroes to look at, except for the older cars that come in the Generally. I looked at Knight Rider, all the cars, from the TVs and movie culture, So again, it kind of got me thinking, let's look at Jeeps. I mean, I remember taking a ride in John Carl's CJ.
Oh, the CJ3A,
Yeah.
the Willys format.
I am a diehard Old Iron fan. I loved Dave Meyer's wagon, 65 wagon. I love that CJ one you said. Again, I'd love to buy, I would love to own one of those. But I know going in, it's not going to have Bluetooth. It's not going to have, a temperament to get in and go. It's going to have to warm up, So looking at all that, it really got me thinking. And just like the Top Gear, the end of their conversation in the show was, as great as these old cars are, they're rubbish to own. They don't handle very well. They're slow. They're smelly. They're cramped. They're hot. A lot of the new technology is far superior. And when you have a Volkswagen Golf GTI that is faster than a Ford Mustang fastback from the 70s, it got me kind of thinking of, again,
Why do you think everybody, even Ian over at Big Tire Garage,
yeah,
he's got one of those Willys wagons. You need to go check out his YouTube. He's done a great build on that thing. It's not done yet,
right?
but he is transplanted a JKU frame, power plant, lift, suspension, and he's going to have all of today's amenities in a very period historic
Shell.
shell with some twists. He got just the shell. He didn't get the front end.
Right.
So he took a TJ and he chopped the TJ grill down to the width of the Willys
Nice.
and narrowed it. So it's probably a 5-slot Jeep front end. It is cool looking. And I've got several friends that have done that, taking the old iron. You want the look, but they are transplanting them onto modern drivetrain and chassis. And I have one friend who's done that to an extreme on a Chevy Apache pickup, 1959.
I remember you showing me pictures of that.
And he basically took a General Motors Trailblazer and didn't just take the the body. He took the shell of the pickup. He took the floor pan out of the Trailblazer, the dashboard out of the Trailblazer, the whole, and then transplanted, trimming and fitting and trimming, and then has mounted this awesome looking Chevy Apache, what they call a 4-headlight version rather than the 2-headlight. So it's the 4-headlight, 2 on each side with the fleet side bed. And it's a modern Trailblazer. Power windows, power door locks, stereo, Bluetooth, air conditioning.
Yeah.
So, but those are the kind of things. So, it gets to that thing. Where is our nostalgia come from? Is it a pipe dream of what we think it was like? I know I drove actually essentially it was used, but it was a current model CJ5.
Right.
Okay, one of the last ones when I was working in Washington, D.C. in the early 80s. This was an early 70s. It was still in our inventory of vehicles to drive on job sites.
Right.
And I loved it. I drove it all over the place, and it sounded like I was driving inside an empty oil drum. Yeah, the lid would, pop and bang, and it rattled, and it, it had a hard time outracing a tortoise. With the old straight 6 in it with the 3-speed manual. And of course, it was a government official edition for the Civil Works is what we used to call it, the black ones. And so, it was about as stripped as it came.
No. Those are the government. That had all kinds of options. It had wipers. It had a steering wheel. It had a horn. Those are some pretty good options.
Yeah, those weren't bad.
Drum
brakes all the way around.
In that price range, like I said, wipers and steering wheel are options.
Yes, and I loved driving that thing around. Took the old steel doors off. They called them the postal cab because they were a metal hard top with the metal doors.
Right.
Not like the modern ones. These were flat sheet metal.
Yeah. Stamped out of a bolt hole.
Yeah. The windows were half glass. They slid half slowered or the front half slid to the back one way or the other. So if you were at a toll booth, you slid the one way. If you were looking for ventilation, you slid it the other way.
Exactly. Dude, vent windows.
They were not the nice vent windows.
No, but I'll cover this in a little bit. But vent windows, dude, I'm sorry, they need to bring those back.
Ram air scoops is what they really were for the passenger compartment. And I'll admit it rode like crap. Bias ply winter tread tires. They weren't off-road tires. They were snow tires that we had on this thing. But you know what? I don't care what job site it was. Potomac River doing work after Air Florida did its thing off the 14th Street Bridge, and we were rebuilding parts of, what do they call it now? Reagan National Airport. Back then it was just National Airport. And we'd be down in the salt marsh ends in this thing, and it would chew its way in, To me, it was the abilities. No, it wasn't really great at street, but it got through town. Yeah. I mean, it got through Washington, D.C. traffic, right in front of the White House. I'm sitting there, no radio, just a blank plate with a hole in the dash, and you couldn't have heard it anyway.
Get any station you want to, as long as you hum it in your own head.
Yeah, or listen to the guy who's pulled up to you next at the red light.
Exactly.
Turn that up a little louder.
Here's Kevin driving to work. It's a small world after all. Gonna get hate mail on that one.
But I don't know. That's a good question. I want to rebuild some more old vehicles, but I do want to do a resto mod.
Yeah.
Because I have become somewhat addicted to comfort. Even my TJ, let's be honest, slightly altered, is altered in places that a lot of guys would think useless on the trail.
Yeah.
Suspension seats. air conditioning, cruise control, Bluetooth, speakerphone.
Sub in the center console.
Yeah, kicker sub in the console that I can definitely drown out the
Sound of parts falling off.
Well, mine
It's a
don't-
Jeep.
It's a Jeep, but my parts haven't fallen off in a while.
I know, but
I pick them up and bolt them up tight. I go around to check things.
you're ruining the mystique.
I'm not saying I'm not underneath it fixing something every other week. That's kind of the thing about being retired.
One of the guys at work he actually made a handmade sign taped to my bumper. I didn't find it until I got to work or got home. You know what it said? Honk if parts fall off. I wonder why people are honking at me. Just trying to be funny. I'm like, why is everybody honking at me?
You're the kind of
I
guy.
didn't cut you off.
I think I could slip underneath and put a zip tie on your drive shaft.
I check before I leave because usually I have to check for leaks.
Oh, that's true.
Let me check the fluids. Yep, I'll leave each one good.
But no, I don't know. That's a good question. There's a nostalgia to Jeep. There's a mystique. The picture of the supply. Actually, it wasn't a sergeant. It was a supply private. You know, in his quarter-ton, utility vehicle
With a 4-cylinder motor.
running stuff to the front lines.
Yes.
Literally dodging incoming rounds and shells to drop off food, to drop off weapons, to drop off
You name it.
ammunition. And some of those guys got a lot closer than you'd think. Now, most of them never got right up on the combat lines, but, they kind of moved around a lot, those front lines.
Yeah.
And you could be driving down a road thinking you got another, I got another mile and a half before I get in the danger zone. And next thing you know, a guy with a German swastika on his helmet pops up out of the hedgerow.
Yeah, with a maul.
And starts popping rounds at you. And then you find out just how fast that little 4-banger can go.
Well, and that's one of the things I want to chat about because, again, we talk about the mystique, about how my Jeep won a war, your Honda cuts my grass, but the point is that, when I look at when I see a lot of the
But
comments.
your Mitsubishi shot a lot of holes in our stuff.
Yeah, too. but one of the things I think of, because Kevin brought up a point about last show about how I had a history of, I'll be honest, pigeonholing listeners or people talking on social media in one lump sum.
Yeah.
And, that was a personal moment of growth. I had my eye twitching. I was good. But I do see some people, and it's the same crowd, that always say, if it's not a real CJ, or if it's not a CJ, it's not a real Jeep. Mm-hmm. And I hate the term real Jeep. And I hate that because we talked about that, about how, the nostalgia of Jeep winning a war and doing these things. Now, again, the real original Jeep had a 4-cylinder motor. And, bear with me as I go down this rabbit hole. The idea of the survivability and ruggedness of simplicity, I think, is what inherently gave Jeep its mystique. Did I follow the good train of thought with that?
Yeah.
Okay. So when people see the CJ, they think of it as a natural progression of the 4-cylinder to a 4.26 cylinder. Mm-hmm. And then, some of you had the 302 V8s. Okay. Like we talked about last show about, V8s in a Jeep. So I understand the natural progression to rugged simplicity and not a lot of electronics and or nanny state.
But there wasn't any then.
Exactly.
The CJ5 to the CJ7 had as much of the, what I want to call it, amenities as any other vehicle. Mm-hmm. A CJ7 had crank windows, but so did a Ford Mustang.
Yes.
They had a 4-speed manual transmission. Mm-hmm. So did the Mustang. All right. You could get it with a 302 V8. Well, that was bigger than the 289 in the Mustang. And I'm just using the Mustang because they're period comparable. One's a sports car, one's the He-Man off-road Jeep. Mm-hmm. The Mustang had coil up front and leaf in the rear. The Jeep had leaf on all 4 corners.
Yeah.
The Mustang came stock with a straight 6. The Jeep came stock with a straight 6. They both had.
Was it the straight 6 or the 4-cylinder stock
for
the CJs?
The ones I'm thinking of, I'm sure you could have gotten the 4-cylinder in a few of them, but pretty much most of the CJ7s came with the
Everybody wanted the inline six.
wanted the inline six.
Okay, I just want to clarify.
Not
my
saying
own
it wasn't
curiosity.
available in a 4, but the predominant, unfortunately, I was back in that time, and do remember when the Golden Eagle was a trim level brand new, and the denim, the Levi's editions.
We had to send someone to get bearings for a Dana 30
Yeah.
the other day at work, and my boss goes, "Yeah, just going down to AMC Jeep Eagle. We'll get." And I said, "Whoa, pump the brakes, sir. Do you want me to see if they have jobber pricing too while we're at it?" And he turned around and goes, "Oh, you're right." I said, "Yeah, man, AMC Jeep Eagle hasn't been a thing for a while."
Well, see, I can remember when Jeep was before it was AMC Jeep. Eagle wasn't even in existence.
Dude, I remember my '88 Comanche. GM keys, Ford ignition.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
what my dad goes. Yeah, it's almost a car. AMC.
That was a partsman vehicle. It was, but anyway, yeah. There's a mystique to it, and there always has been. It's, it is the ruggedness, and I think more than anything, even more than the ruggedness, it's the individualism.
Yeah.
You and all the other Jeepers are bucking the crowd. You're not worried about a scratch here and there, and even if you never go any further. And at that time, it would be the softball field, not the soccer field. You had that aura like you could be up there in the Rocky Mountains, with a backpack and, go places that you could leave the Jeep unlocked and nobody'd even find it, much less break into it, And there was that sense of, like I said, individualism, freedom, ruggedness. And then, of course, even way back then, there was that little thing about Jeeps that just nothing else has come to that level.
Yeah.
And that is make it your own.
Right.
Sometimes I think a Jeep really should come in a box without wheels, without tires, and without suspension. And you have to check off and order what you want and finish it yourself. And it would be much simpler build and buy.
Well, one of the things that I think is funny because I'm fascinated by this Facebook page. I won't mention it, but it talks about how you think you're a big car and tough guy. Yeah, your owner's manual that you haven't read in your glove box. Back when your grandpa bought his 60 or 72 car, the owner's manual told you how to adjust the valve lash. Mm-hmm. So it's like. And that's what I'm thinking about. Back then, the idea, and I actually truly believe this is that things were built to last. Because the idea is that if you built it to last, I'm sure there was some planned obsolescence. But it was
still of a new concept because we were growing still.
Yeah.
Post-Vietnam markets were about growth. And as far as what you're talking about, the built to last, one thing where we have improved dramatically is in rust protection. Mm-hmm. We get upset now when we see a little bit of rust, on the floor of a Jeep, or a rocker panel rust through. And I just look at people and go, "Come on, you
have no idea.
You have no idea." I can still remember when I was working in a garage and working as a mechanic, and got my West by God, Virginia inspection license so that I could do state inspections. And people were using metallic duct tape to patch up the carrier area of the gas tank in the old Chevrolet pickup trucks because the gas tanks would fall out. Or not pickup trucks, I'm sorry, station wagons because they would fall out. Headlights would fall and be swinging on their power cords in cars that were only 3 years old.
Yeah. Literally on some of the older build qualities, not making a joke, on quiet nights, you could hear them rust.
I used to joke about that, but yeah, there was some noise. So, I don't know. And listeners, I'm going to ask you guys, get on Facebook. Tell us, why do you like Jeeps? Old or new? And which do you like? Old or new, and why? I'm very curious about it. I have my own personal view. I'm one of those people who I think everybody hates because I'm right in the middle. Mm-hmm. I think the CJ was great, but it had its flaws with the straight suspension. Mm-hmm. The YJ was really just a reskinned CJ. Yeah. The tubs are the same. It's got a different front end on it, and that's about it. And I'm not a big fan of the JK series. They're good Jeeps, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
They are very serviceable, but they were first step into the in my opinion, the soccer mamification.
The CAN bus.
The CAN bus, the electronics, I'm still a fan of the TJ. The first one with the coil suspension, which I didn't think was a bad thing.
Right.
It seems to be adaptable. I have seen it adapted to many different platforms.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, nowadays, a TJ is an ancient beast.
That's one question I have to ask you.
Yeah.
How long did you drive that CJ?
About 3 years.
3 years? Okay. Here's my take on it. And again, I haven't. And I know you've driven the old M series.
Yeah, you might say so.
Okay, but here's my take on it. And everyone goes, well, you don't know what you're talking about, Scott. And I've had a few people say that to me.
Yeah.
But here's the interesting thing. My first Jeep was an '88 Jeep Comanche.
Okay.
That I helped rebuild. Mm-hmm. Okay, just the engine wise, and comfort wise, it had air conditioning.
Okay.
It had a lot of mechanical problems. It had the Peugeot transmission. But I loved the truck, and as a whole, I loved it. I just didn't have the money to put into it. Now, knowing now what I knew then, I would have kept it.
Mm-hmm.
But I sold it for what I bought it for, and I bought a YJ.
Okay.
Now, during the 8 years I drove that thing daily, I had both hard and soft tops, and that's why I love the vent windows, because my hard top, I had the vent windows. Okay. But I had no air conditioning. I had a 4-cylinder, Rhino lined, no carpet, how everyone says a real Jeep should be. And I know when the YJ came out, like you said, it was panned. It was, oh my God, this isn't a real Jeep, yada, yada, yada. During the time I owned the YJ,
mm-hmm.
we got my wife a 4-door Rubicon, 3.8.
Mm-hmm.
And I drove that thing daily. Or I didn't drive it daily, but I drove it here and there. I'm like, oh my God, this is so much nicer. Mm-hmm. Because this is a nice plush ride. It's longer control arms than a TJ. I hadn't driven a TJ by then. And, the air conditioning works great. The radio sounds great. This is so plush and so nice.
I do remember when you guys first got that.
Yeah.
Your reaction was quite...
I loved it.
Yeah.
I said, I don't care 4-door or not. As a daily driver,
it was awesome.
This is a great... And I was a trail rig. Mm-hmm. It was very capable.
It was.
But I'd rather take the YJ out into the rougher areas because I knew the survivability would be higher because, again, I could spin the wheels in the YJ and not have to worry about it. The sheet metal was thicker. Mm-hmm. I didn't get hit with a beer can off the road and dent my door. That didn't really happen, but you get my point. Mm-hmm. And then I started thinking when it came time we sold the YJ. Mm-hmm. When it came time to get another Jeep, I went backwards.
Mm-hmm. I know that.
I got an LJ because to me, that's the sweet spot. Now we have the Gladiator, which is a step up from the JK. The Gladiator rides so much nicer than the JK. So many more nicer conveniences, so much more power, so much more capability as far as the Gladiator goes. But the TJ, I agree with you, is a sweet spot. I have just enough creature comforts for a daily driver to enjoy and enjoy the ride, get there, and not have my kidneys beat to a Slurpee. Mm-hmm. But if I had my druthers, I would have the LJ as my daily, and I wouldn't mind an old M series because that would be fun to take off-road in its simplistic form. Mm-hmm. So I understand the idea of that. There's the daily crowd and the soccer mamification, if you will, because those are nice, bridge the gaps.
Yeah.
They're good off-road in that. But for that real, stick shift and wind in your teeth or bugs in your teeth and wind in your face experience, either a TJ or an older Jeep, I get that. But not as a daily driver. I could not drive a CJ daily.
It was, for me, it was a vehicle that belonged to my employer, not mine.
Right.
But I absolutely enjoyed it. Now, it was about as raw as you get. It rattled, like I said, it banged, it dripped, it leaked, but it started. Mm-hmm. In cold weather, it might argue with me a little bit.
Had to warm up a little.
Had to warm it up to get it to start. And one time I did have to pull my personal, and I'll admit it was a little Chevy Chevette. It's the only thing I could afford as a newlywed. It was embarrassing to drive that thing.
Hey, man. But at one time you had a vet.
Yeah, but it was a Chevy.
At one time you had a vet.
But I took a trick that the old aircraft mechanics with the old radials would do, in the cold. Is I would take a heater hose, and put it on the tailpipe of the Chevette and hang it under the hood of the CJ.
So the heat exhaust would warm it up.
It would warm it up enough that finally it would cough and sputter and come to life.
And that wasn't just you.
That was the Jeep. I was young at that point. And so you've seen that picture of me in
I have.
in the leather jacket with the rifle and the.
Dude, let me tell you, you're like John Denver meets Rambo. It was kind of cool looking.
But so I'm driving through D.C. when the world was in
8 below.
Well, they were also, though, we're talking about the 80s, the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, and it was all the plastic women and guys with the. The what they call it,
The medallions and the chest hair
yeah,
flowing.
all that stuff. And here I am driving through with flannel shirts, leather jacket, bomber, an A1, what is it? Not an A1, oh God, I can't remember now. Is it an A1 bomber jacket?
I don't know, but I can pitch you with the
and
bell
jeans.
bottoms.
No, boot cut.
Boot cut, yeah,
Boot cut. And then I got a pair
Stetson.
of the it was a Stetson.
I know,
Absolutely, it was a Stetson.
I know.
And the dingo leather boots with the steel toes on them for working the job sites.
Yeah.
And that was my mode of dress as I'm going from job to job around D.C.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all out there, and they're, as we used to call it, plastic and paint, like the song says.
Yep.
And here I am driving through with this smoky old Radley CJ5. The doors might even been off even in the middle of winter sometimes because it was easier to see in traffic.
Yeah.
And I got stopped more than once by the Metro Police. And where are your mirrors? They're right there on the door where they're supposed to be. Where are the doors? In the back seat.
In the back, yeah.
And you know what? The guy looked at me. He says, "Aren't you cold?" I said, "A little bit."
I'm a man's man.
And he, whatever. Okay.
It's so funny you said this. My grandmother, for 3 weeks, she lost the muffler off her Impala, GM build quality. And she put the muffler in the trunk, and for 3 weeks she was driving around town. She kept getting pulled over. "Ma'am, your car's way too loud." She'd pop the trunk. "Yeah, I know, the muffler just fell off." "Okay, man, make sure you get it fixed." She shut the trunk and keep going. For 3 weeks she got away with it until the same cop got her twice. He was like, "Don't work twice."
It don't work twice.
"I saw you 3 weeks ago." And she's like, "I know." Off to
But,
Meineke she went.
Yeah, got put on with about the same quality the manufacturer did.
that.
But no, I don't know. And the thing is, now that I'm on the, heading up the sixth century, sixth generation, sixth decade, for lack of a better description,
Right.
Sixth decade. God, I'm not sure I'd be as comfortable back in that CJ5 bouncing around.
Yeah.
Admittedly, I was driving around town, so 50 miles an hour might be the top end. So it really wasn't a big deal. I was back down in that. Well, remember the original Jeeps were limited. They had a big placard on the visor above the driver's side. Maximum speed, 45 miles an hour.
Yeah. What's the one that Bonnie bought that they're going to call Jarhead? It's the M175 Kaiser front end.
Oh yeah.
You see, I love
the
those.
military version pickup.
Oh my
Now,
God, that is a dream.
For those of you referencing our last show, for those of you who want a Jeep truck that's a real truck, get the Kaiser 715 military spec truck.
If you can find one in good shape.
Yeah, well, most of them have become, iron oxide.
Well, and that's the thing too. Like back in the old days, like
Don't walk here. See that rust spot? That's the rust spot of a World War II hero.
one day I'm going to fix that thing. But no, like we talked about the technology. Again, technology is a double-edged sword. Like, now we have hydroform frames.
Yep.
So
They're stronger per pound than the regular frames. However, because they are thinner, rust degradation is more severe quickly. Does that make sense? You have less to work with. The old frames were so overbuilt because of the fact you were working with roll stock, or even, forgings. You could rust for 20 years and still have enough cross-sectional area to clean it up and paint it and keep moving.
Keep moving.
On the other hand, the entire life of the vehicle, you were dragging around an extra 500, 600, 700 pounds of steel that wasn't really doing anything.
On bias ply tires.
And now the hydroform frames, you don't have an extra pound to spare, okay? Yeah. So that's why with any of the hydroform frame vehicles, you have got to stay on that rust.
And especially TJs.
Yeah. Oh, TJs. Don't get me started on the fact that who builds a frame with a hole facing the front tires, okay, where the kick up, right at the back quarter point is the tire rotation. And it's an uphill hole
Yeah.
from the lower frame where, your 3 bolts hold your whole transfer case, transmission, and skid plate all in one package to your frame. Put it in with, what are they?
Nutserts.
Nutserts
Yeah.
with no drain hole. So it pumps all kinds of water, salt, grit,
Dirt.
sand, mud. I can't imagine, when I cleaned mine out, when I had to replace the nutserts, what came out was phenomenal.
Yeah.
And just a plug, a plug for a plug. They now make body plugs for those frame members, and it's been the smartest $4.70 I've ever spent.
On my bucket list, when we go to redo my lift,
Yeah.
I want to do. You say you point the Jeep down at a steep angle,
Yeah.
garden hose one side, garden hose the other side. Get those plugs.
I actually
after
used
I do
a smaller one of the vinyl lines you buy at Lowe's or Home Depot, and then got an adapter and put it on the hose so I could thread it down and just blow from the inside as best I could.
and then use that rust protectant like you talked about.
Yep.
Because, again, LJ frames are harder and harder to come by. And everyone goes, well, I'll just get one of those kits. No, I don't want to get one of those kits. I don't want that to happen, okay?
You want to stop the rust if you can.
Yeah, I'm chasing all the other nitnoiding things that we'll get to here in a little bit.
So-
But again, I understand, and I really think that it's the mystique of owning one, and plus also there is a little bit of bragging rights.
Oh, yeah.
I brought this old, like John Carl.
Yeah.
It was a family project. He brought that CJ back from the brink, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
and now he has done a lot and has done some great things and brought
Just a
them
couple
back.
weeks ago, he called me up. He was, who do you know that'll build a carburetor?
Yep, I got the same text message.
And I said, well, I'll be glad to help if you want. And he's like, well, do you think I could do it? And I'm like, John, yes. You've got more than enough skills to rebuild an old Carter 1-barrel.
Yeah.
And we talked about it for probably a half an hour. And I have yet to hear back from him. And I expect that if it went south, he was going to call me and say, okay, come pick up the basket and make it work again. John, though, has more than enough skills
Yes.
to do this. It's just, it was new territory for him. And he says, well, I was reading and there's these gauges, and then people talk about drill bits. And I said, time out. You're talking about float setting, aren't you? Yeah. You don't have to be that picky.
Yeah.
I said, if it's turn the thing top of the carburetor upside down, if the float's basically parallel to the top of the bowl or the top of the carburetor cap, top, and then turn it over the other way, and then get yourself a piece of hose if you're nervous about it. If you're not, like I am, you just go to the fuel inlet, turn it upside down, blow in it. If air goes out, you didn't set it right. If you can't blow through it, you're good. Turn it over the other way so the float dangles down, blow through it. If you can blow through it, you're done. Your float's set correct. Most likely it'll run fine.
Well, that's the thing that like older vehicles are very forgiving. When my friend had his 55 Plymouth Belvedere, first off, he goes, hey, Scott, go move this. Okay. I get inside. I grab the on the steering column.
The Prindle.
Okay. Up, straight up, start backing it up. He goes, darn it, I thought I'd get you. I'm
Oh,
like,
you got 3 on the tree?
3 on the tree. He goes, darn it, I thought I'd get you. And I said, you want to know what, buddy? I saw that one thing of Hudson Hawk. I knew what to look for, buddy, because I had a clutch pedal and a thing on the stick. I'm like, all right, straight up is reverse, down is for us first, to forward is second, and straight down from there is third.
Actually, the same pattern as if it was on the floor. It's
Yeah.
just turned sideways and put up on the column.
Exactly.
With
He
a
goes-
lot more slop and linkage.
And what's funny is that when U.S. Brake used to be the only game in town, okay, in Tampa, and one of the cool things we did is that we got that inline 6, that flathead inline 6 out. He bought a master rebuild kit for it. We had never built anything, and like my first experience driving a V8 was his '72 Buick Skylark, which was actually rather cool because I did my first burnout in it. But besides the point is, we tore that engine down, we honed it, put the new rings, put it all back together. It ran beautifully once we got the break-in procedure done because it was very forgiving. Now, there's a point of contention. It ran beautifully. Wouldn't move anywhere because someone put the clutch disc in backwards.
Oops.
And it was the last clutch disc on the planet. So we took it down to U.S. Brake and they refinished it for us.
I was going to say, you could
Yeah.
reline a clutch disc if it's not mutilated in the metal, the center.
It was darn close.
Gotcha.
But we got it done, and a new turning of the flywheel later. Oops. But again, it was fun because the older vehicles are forgiving. When we took the transmission out to rebuild it, Holy cats, dude. The transmission itself was like the size of your keyboard.
But okay, let's compare and contrast.
Yes.
A couple of the guys that we know, I'm not embarrassed to say I'm over 60. So my preference, of course, I do like my TJ.
Right.
Because it's older and simpler. But let's grab some of the new guys that are, mom and dad just got the 16-year-old his first Jeep.
Right.
And he's driving, and he looks at a 2011 JKU as, God, that's an old Jeep. It's easy to work on. Versus a 2020 or the soon-to-be 2021s,
Right.
which are the latest thing coming out, folks, in case you haven't seen it. And it's broaching in some of the newer vehicles out there is instead of a CAN bus communication, there's, what do they call it? Oh God, I forgot it. It's local area network
Tell you what.
Yeah, we got to pause for a minute. I see a battery
Yeah.
with no bars, not even red.
We're going to pause for station identification. We'll be right back after this message. Hey listeners, Scott here, just reminding you to check out all the great content on the 4x4 Radio Network. Not only you can check out the great shows, but also check out our show. Also, too, don't forget the Patreon page. Lots of really cool stuff there. Again, as little as $1 a month will get you on to see videos of us recording. And lastly, Mark at WranglerFix.com has also created a promo code, BR549. That's right, as Mark would say, honest as the day is long, he's willing to pass on the savings to you. Hope y'all get that reference. But with that, it's on back to the show with Kevin's Garage.
You think it was weird from your point of view.
So anyways, as we
Sorry
were
about
back,
that dropout, folks, but some of the camera gear here is getting a little antiquated, and the battery's life is
kind of like my jokes, thin.
thin and dying.
Hey, just because that.
I was talking about the batteries, okay? You're
Well,
the one
let's
that
be-
cut in on mine.
Well, to be honest with you, like that, like that battery, that little thing I just did kind of died on the vine. But
I did break down and order AC power packs for the GoPros, and we'll be trying it hopefully by the next podcast. They'll be here, where we should be on AC power and not have to stop for anything other than Scott running to the litter box.
I had to go. this STP is going right through me. So
Oh, you need a little higher weight.
exactly. Nah.
Get the either that or the pre-assembly lube that's a little stickier and hangs on there.
Not gonna touch that. Not gonna touch that.
So anyway,
So-
back to old Jeeps.
Yes.
Is where I was talking about is the fact that, what's an old Jeep is relative. And that's
Yeah.
one of the first things I guess we should have hit in the beginning. And is, to me, a TJ is still a modern Jeep. It is a pre-CAN bus, but it does have a data network, but it's a very simplistic one. The later models all have the CAN bus, and then there's something local. It's not a LAN, a local area network. It's called a LIN, I believe, local integrated network, to where some vehicles now, like the alternator. The alternator has a computer in it.
Yeah.
Not just a set of diode packs and that the ECU can control, but rather the actual computer portions are in the alternator. GM's doing a lot of that. And so the ECU just says, hey, I want to see 14 volts. And then the alternator puts out and checks the voltage and basically works on its own based off this data packet, which is going to make it, to me, kind of a more challenging thing, because I was watching one of the YouTube channels that I like to follow about a garage up in New York that I've talked about before, but the guy just phenomenal diagnosis.
Judo chop.
Yeah, that one.
That's a great channel.
He's an awesome mechanic. He's very what I want to call it. He doesn't brag about it. He doesn't make a big deal. He just says he's just a regular old mechanic Joe. But you listen to this guy go through particularly the electrical, but he does all of it, and he shows you where he's using the service manual diagrams, and he shows you that, and he shows you his equipment. And yeah, sometimes he's using some pretty up-spec equipment, but most of the time it boils down to just understanding it. So where I'm going with that is, the newer vehicles are getting more
Tech heavy.
tech heavy. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And so here he was servicing an alternator in a vehicle that was producing power, but it wasn't talking to the ECU. So it was getting a check engine light and a check alternator light and an error code, but it was still charging the battery. But that means the alternator was in limp mode, And I kind of go, really? We got to... It's the alternator's working. It's producing,
Yeah.
I remember when, as long as the alternator produced, 14 volts, we were good.
Yeah.
But no, we've got to regulate things to the nth degree. And the only inherent concern I have with those newer vehicles that way is, how does that affect the off-road reliability?
Yeah.
For all the creature comforts I've added to Slightly Altered, I'm not afraid, and you've seen me swimmer up to the door jams and deeper, and if the lighting circuit to the tail light went and I lost my backup lights, so what?
Something got wet.
Something got wet, and
I can still get it home.
I can get it home. There's my concern, and that's why I go with I still enjoy the TJ, because it's got enough intelligence to be comfortable, but it's got enough simplicity to still be highly reliable.
Yeah.
Almost everything in the TJ has a very effective limp home mode.
Right.
And it's limped home a few times. Let's be honest. We've been out on the trails together, and I've seen many of the newer vehicles not limp home so well.
And that's my counter.
But that's just me.
And that's my counterpoint, because I remember when I was young in my parts career, General Motors had a real hard push to the 48 volt system.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
That didn't last long.
Well, the idea is that cars are very computer heavy. Mm-hmm. People are plugging in everything, from their Walkman to their Discman.
Yep.
And so, and plus also everyone putting out all this electronic stuff. So look at the Gladiator. I have a 12 volt battery on top of a 12 volt battery. So now I have effectively a 24 volt system.
No, you have two 12 volt cells in parallel. Not in series.
But the point, though, is yes, there is tech heavy stuff, and just like I talk about going into buying an older Jeep, you got to go in buying a newer vehicle. Is this vehicle going to be the trail horse that I could take it out and get it swimming up to the doors? Could I take it through a mud hole? Could I take it rock bouncing? The answer to those questions is I didn't buy it for any of that.
Right.
I bought it for mild trail usage, if it's going to get trail used at all.
Yeah. Fire roads and things like that.
Citrus, and maybe Jasper.
Yeah.
Maybe Jasper. But the idea is that the JK, we had a daily driver and tried to use it as a trail rig, which worked and works for a lot of people. But seeing the shortcomings of the JK, knowing what I know now, that's why I went with the TJ myself, or the LJ, because, again, it's that sweet spot. Just like when I talk about knowing your enemy, but knowing what you're getting into with the older models. Yes, the 4.2 is bulletproof, but it was not fast. Mm-mm. Did it have a lot of low-end grunt? Yep. But you get that in a certain angle, you're going to starve the carburetor for fuel. Well, in the same angle, you'd be starving the engine for oil. But again, this trail survivability. Mm-hmm. So that's when we talk about bench building and what are you going to use a Jeep for? You know what I mean?
As we've said many times, I think that is the one place that most new Jeep owners and even existing ones are not really honest with themselves.
And I actually...
it's a sad... Sorry, I was
you're
standing on my own headset cable. I'm going, why is my ear being pulled sideways?
Good thing you weren't shaking your leg.
Strange thought processes there, Scott. So, sorry, swallowed wrong. No, it's not Rona.
Yeah.
I think most people that are dissatisfied with their Jeeps in one way or another were not honest with themselves. And I'm speaking about those that are unhappy with what they've done. Not necessarily those that are unhappy with a stock vehicle, because again, we've said many, many times, Jeep builds it for the masses, not for you.
Yeah.
I hate to put it that way, but
No, but that's true.
It's built for the masses, but it is built with the flexibility that you can make it your own. But what is it that you truly need it for every day, the vast majority of the time? And you need to rank those, and that's just my way of doing it is, I had to admit to myself, as much as I'd love the, uber tough forever trail rig, my wife has a couple of busted, or blown out vertebrae in her neck, and I'd like her to go with me. So it had to have a soft suspension. I wanted to be able to drive it, through Mojave someday. But when I built it, I had to drive to and from the base every day for work.
Yeah.
It was my DD. So I needed a vehicle that could handle rush hour traffic. And folks, I'm not saying that rush hour traffic in Tampa, Florida is bad. I've been in DC, I've been in New York City, I've been all over the world, quite frankly. But it does one thing that most of them don't, and that is, I don't care what the posted speed limit sign, the road's open, we're gone. And if you don't keep up with traffic, you get run over. You can get rear-ended really bad. And it's kind of weird. And of course, in a Jeep, you just learn to live in the right lane, but you still get people coming up behind you, at very high figures. And so I wanted something that could keep up with traffic and handle freeway running appropriately and not be, this
a liability.
goose, all over the roads. So I had to kind of rank my priorities and realizing that, okay, I might have to give up on 35s and 6.5 inch lift to be able to commute every day effectively. But I didn't have to give it up on all lifts. So I chose a 4.5 inch extreme articulation, 33s, which kept my height down to where the Jeep handles very well, but I have the same tire footprint as 35s. And little things like that, give and take, and I had to be honest with myself. And was I perfect? Nope. Okay, I made a $5,000 error. You know what that was, Scott?
The re-gearing.
No, the front end.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
I tried to build the 30.
The high pinion Dana 30.
I got a high pinion axle. Fortunately, it was cheap, and then tore it completely apart and did a little tweaking here, a little tweaking there, new gears, new half shafts, the whole 9 yards. Put it in and ran it for 2 years and bent it.
On 33s.
On 33s. All right. So had to replace it. And I decided I was not going to buy another front axle another time. So that's where my Pro Rock 44 came from.
Right.
And I spent probably 4 or 5 phone calls over the period of 2 weeks with Pro Rock on the phone to build out the sheet on my front axle to what I wanted. And they were laughing because they're like, well, what tires are you going to run? I said, I'm running 12.5 33s. Okay. Well, anything we have here would do that. I said, really? I said, if I stand the Jeep on its nose entirely on the front axle, oh, you might want to up-spec the tubes.
Okay.
But why would you do that? I said, not why would I do it? I've done it. And that's why my other one is now bent in weird places.
Right.
So, look back at your experiences. Where have you wheeled? Where do you really drive the Jeep? Is your wife or your husband, who is not the off-roader, because it can be both down here, I guarantee you, there's plenty of situations where mama's the wild one behind the wheel, right, Scott?
Yep.
Yeah, we could have saved a whole huge issue if we just changed your induction on your JKU beforehand.
Well, I do want to. This is a great segue.
Yeah,
and this actually is a really great segue. But before we segue into it, I do want to bring this up: is that I'm not trying to dissuade people from old iron.
No,
I love old iron.
Just be honest with yourself.
Because and one of the things I thought is really cool, and I see this all the time, is people go, well, my CJ, outperforms anybody's JK all day long. Okay, you mean your V8 powered CJ on Dana 60 axles out of a Ford 1-ton truck?
Yeah, that's not the original CJ.
You're not in a CJ anymore. So that
you're in, Joe Smith's custom built.
Right. So my whole thing in this, and I'm going to segue the segue if we can do that, is that, we talk about being honest with ourselves, is there is nothing wrong with just taking your Jeep out, enjoying it as it is because it's very capable stock form. Kevin and I told one listener that came to one of our teaching events, what's the first thing I should do? Sway arm disconnects. Big time. No, sway bar disconnects.
And then go out and find yourself some off-camber trails and some
just
gullies and spotters that will go with you. And we've done a lot of that with people. We've taken several groups out over the years and introduced them to their Jeep. Because if you've never wheeled it, if you're listening to this podcast dreaming, God bless you. But, you go out the first time. And I personally, as a training spotter, I love teaching. And this is going to sound very sexist, and it's not. I love teaching women because they tend to be open-minded.
And they listen.
And they listen because they don't try and convince the world they know it all. Mm-hmm. They go, I've never done this before, but I think it's cool. Teach me. And they listen. And
Yes.
I have done it with, and the results, when they come off of some of our trails, having lifted a tire for the first time. Mm-hmm. Now, if you're a seasoned wheeler, you know that lifting a tire is not a big deal. Really is part of just driving. But the first time you do it and you lift a front tire and then you ease forward and then you hit that tipping point, for those of you who wheel know what I'm talking about, and she starts to creak and the suspension kind of groans and it talks to you and you see the eyes start to turn all white and you get their attention, calm down, you're going to tip forward and it kind of goes, come on, but start moving again. You're good. Now your rear tire's off the ground.
Yeah.
And they roll on down, and the next thing you know, they get that bump in the rear as that rear tire makes contact, and they come on through, and you spot them right and left. And when they come off and they jump out of the car, and they're screaming at the top of their lungs, not in your rage screams, but in the, my God, I did it, I did it, I did it. They did it. And it's really gratifying.
Absolutely.
From the coach and spotter. And as opposed to, and I'm not trying to be, again, sexist, but a lot of guys come in with a chip on their shoulder. Oh, I don't need spotting. I can do this. And
I can hit it with speed.
Oh, that's the guy that we had to winch out of the pole pit, who spun a pole, literally spun a wooden power pole laid out loose, spun it up into his rear wheel cavity and got it wedged, pushing his suspension down between the frame and the suspension. Yeah. And we had to winch the pole out of his suspension and then winch him out of the hole. Yeah. And this was after his wife had gone through it, being spotted through about a half an hour before.
Didn't have an issue.
Didn't spin a wheel, had just gently brought the Jeep through. And again, I'm going to speak my opinion, and this is strictly Kevin's opinion. Mm-hmm. The whole focus of a Jeep is getting to someplace. Yes. Not breaking it to see how bad beeped you are. Think about the south end of a northbound mule. It's about getting places. It's about getting things done. The whole genesis of a Jeep was to move material, to move troops, to handle those kinds of things, to get from point A to point B. Mm-hmm. And that's what I still like to do with mine. It's just my point B, maybe a wee bit off the beaten path.
Well, and that's another thing too. When we talk about like older irons, older iron is you can't buy a lot of the off-the-shelf things. So here's where the segue of the segue comes in.
Yeah, this is getting out to the garage, isn't it?
You have to be a craftsman, okay? And
or crazy.
Or crazy. So
both work.
We'll just tippy-tire out there real quickly. And here's my point. My LJ has 150,000 miles, 30,000 miles of my I Love Tacos butt in it. And the previous owners, I don't know, but I knew the one guy was like 6'4".
So in other words, he's scrunched down with his head up against.
So he was dinoing out the roof of this. So that seat has seen better days.
That's an understatement. I didn't realize it was as bad as it was.
Well, and so, again, we all know I'm cheap. But I'm also
frugal,
but I'm also trying to buy property and whatnot and other stuff that's in my life right now. But the point is that do I have the ability to go out and buy a new seat? Yes, I do. I have the ability to go buy 2 new seats. It's not a problem. But also, too, is sometimes like there's the parts changer and then there's a craftsman. And being in these older Jeeps, you have to be a craftsman. Parts aren't available for most things. So Kevin and I...
You do want to sometimes fix instead of replace if at all possible.
And I wanted to do that. So Kevin with his experience, and let's be honest, and I'm going to put Kevin on the spot now. He's going to hate this. I have not met more of a Renaissance craftsman than I have in this gentleman that's sitting across from me. Because not only does the guy, he knows a lot about a lot, he doesn't know everything, but he knows a lot about a lot and is willing to learn. He's also done an incredible amount of hands-on experience. So when he said, well, let's just take a quick look under your seat. Let's see what's actually broken. Because literally I was sitting in my Jeep staring at the steering wheel Jeep. I'd have to like bring the seat all the way up, sit very uncomfortably to see the hood of my Jeep because the cushions and the springs have collapsed so much.
Imagine going to see your grandmother's sofa and you sit down. It's one of those that you sink in and your knees are up against your chin because it's cushed all the way down.
And you're trying to operate a clutch.
Yeah.
So Kevin's like, let's just take a quick look. And he peeks his head up and he goes, oh, yeah, I found your problem, man. We can probably get some springs from Lowe's and we could probably repair this seat. It'd take us a couple hours. I'm like, well, heck, put a new seat in, take a couple hours. I looked at buying JK seats. Mm-hmm. The amount of fab work was even more than doing this.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? What am I out? $20 in parts?
I think the total bill was $27, but you can take two of them back.
Yeah.
So, yeah, about $25 in parts.
And another $10 for lunch. But we pulled the seat out.
Thank you, by the way.
No problem. We pulled the seat out. And, of course, doing the biopsy. Yep, we found 45 cents in change, a quarter and 2 dimes.
Yeah, we what we did, folks, is the Jeep TJ seats, and they vary from model to model in the different Jeeps, but this one is a steel frame. It has just six coil springs, about
8x8 lattice work.
Yeah, no, the springs are probably about 1.5 inches long with some longer tails. And then there's this lattice work in the middle of high-strength wire, just twisted together. And there's a nylon tube over some of the wires, some of what I call the running wires from front to back. And his middle running wire was gone, and the nylon tube was pretty well broken up. His springs were shot, to say the least. The foam was there in spirit more than in fact. So what we did is, I'll admit, this is a little bit of the barnyard fixing.
Yes.
The other thing is, so we pulled the seat apart. We took the seat out. We took the back off. We stripped the fabric off. For those that don't know it, but the TJ seats and almost all vehicle seats are either put on with hog rings or which are little split rings that you squeeze closed, and or little plastic
channels
that snap over things. And
I'll put pics on the Instagram page.
So some of them were a little more challenging to get to than others, particularly since one side of his seat frame had been bent.
Yeah.
That had pinched that, and we actually had to bend it back to get the channels out. And we were able to take the foam and seat off. The seat fabric is also attached to the foam. We didn't get into that, but that's hog ring down with a little wire into the seat itself. The foam has a wire embedded in it as well that creates that pull down in the middle where your inner fabric is versus the outer rim of fabric that's considered the bolster area. Not that any TJ seat has a real bolster in it.
Especially mine, not anymore.
Oh, no. But there's a little, like you said, what was it, about a 8x10 grid, and the grid was falling apart. Mm-hmm. When we got it apart and saw the frame, lo and behold, the holes where the springs had been in had rusted and worn and were significantly larger. So what we did very simply was I brought out the welder and started welding up the holes. And they were a little bit of a challenge because the metal had worn so thin that it was burning rather than welding. Yeah. I had to turn my MIG down so low and go, bzz,
cigarette lighter,
let it cool down, bzz, let it cool down. Bzz. And I was able to build it back, and a little bit of quick work with a flappy disc on a grinder. We profiled it back and then reamed the holes out with a step bit just so that they would now round and proper again. So we restored that frame, is what he's trying to say, as well as removing the bends from previous drivers. Perhaps the accident where the guy drove in the back may have caused a little bit of a bend. Yeah. Could we have gotten another seat? Probably. Would it have been expensive? It'd been a heck of a lot more than $27. Then we went back and went to Lowe's and picked up some pretty stout springs. Now, they weren't exactly the right length. They were a little long, but that was okay.
We got a grinder.
We got a grinder and a torch, and we shortened them to where they had some tension. We bought some other fairly stout wire that I laced back through the center of that the seat cross high tension wires, and created a lattice work by tying them all together, keeping them spaced, fairly thick wire because that's a high tension area, and I needed it soft enough to work. But ultimately, when it's in, it's got to be strong enough to hold. And there's nothing down there other than the bottom of the foam, so it didn't really hurt to have some extra. And then we did some trial fitting by throwing the foam and then having Scott sit his butt on the floor.
Like, hey, that's much better.
Yeah. And we ended up adding a kind of a rectangular piece of 1/4-inch plywood.
Yeah.
With the edges rounded so that it didn't dig into anything, and zip tied it to the top of that frame. Again, not that the seat drastically needed it, but the foam was pretty gone.
Yeah.
Now, we could have gotten a new foam block if you can find one for a TJ. I don't know if there's anybody making reproduction ones right now.
They're to say, hey, buy a new seat.
Yeah. And then reassembled. We added some springs. That's what we did. The Jeep typically has 3 on the right side, 3 on the left side of the seat, nothing fore and aft.
Yeah.
And Scott's problem was the fact that, particularly in the back of the seat, it was collapsing.
Right by the tailbone area.
So we added some additional. I put 1 spring up front as a counterbalance and 2 very short, heavy springs in the back to the back area to kind of complete a 360-degree spring net. We doubled up the mid springs. We kept the factory ones, and we added the aftermarket ones to the same holes in a kind of a V pattern.
Yep.
To keep it stabilized, and then reassembled the seat. As he said, cleaned out a few quarters and dimes and things like that, and readjusted some of the other linkages that were not behaving well.
Yes.
The tilt and slide functions, and then reinstalled the seats, and it was amazing the difference. Now, the bolster area is still very soft, particularly the get in and get out side of the bolster where it's been scrunched for
150,000 miles.
150,000 miles, and there's not much I can do with the bolster side.
Yeah.
But the center section that supports your butt,
I can now see over the hood.
yeah, it's and without being excessively firm. Okay, it still has some give and take. So, long story short, it was an interesting couple of hours reconstructing TJ's seat. That now looks exactly like it did before we started.
Mm-hmm.
The difference
Stealth
is
mode.
It works.
Yeah. And that was the biggest thing
And
for
a whole
me.
whopping $25.
Yeah.
$25. And Scott now is like, now I know what the inside of a seat looks like.
Well, and that's one of the things when we talked about this whole subject matter is that, like, you can't, sometimes you can buy repop seats. Mm-hmm. Okay. But sometimes when you, like the drive shaft on John Carl CJ,
yeah,
sometimes you just want to keep that old.
Yeah, you want to keep the original. Well, in some cases you have to.
Yeah.
If you're looking at a CJ3A Willys, you need the pencil shafts forward and aft to clear everything.
Yeah.
There's not enough Jeep there to fit anything that we think of as a normal drive shaft.
Yeah.
Heaven forbid any of these new super tubes you see, that are 6 inches in diameter on some of the bigger vehicles. So he needed that pencil shaft up front. And when I say pencil shaft, it's 1 inch in diameter.
Yeah.
And you're not buying one. You're going to have it made.
Right.
Or in his case, we took the parts. We took it to
Specialty drive
shafts in Brandon and said, Shane, can you make this live again? And his answer was, sure.
Yeah.
We can cut and weld and fab anything. And he checked it over. He says, you know what? You don't need a new drive shaft. You just need the slip yoke end.
Right.
And so he put a new slip yoke end on, welded it in, balanced it, trued it. And John has probably an 80% original front pencil drive shaft with new U-joints in it.
Right.
But it fits his CJ3A like it was made for it.
Because it was.
And it works. And it doesn't buzz down the road and shake and rattle and roll. And he's got a weird one. He's got a CJ3A that actually drives straight.
Well, that's another thing, too, where even if you buy some of this repop stuff, you've got to be a craftsman, especially if it's made overseas, like Malaysia. You got to do some fussing.
The Brits have a wonderful term for that.
What's that?
They call them pattern pots. because they followed a pattern. Now,
Yes.
the problem is that sometimes they took the pattern off the outside of the pot, so it's running a wee bit big, and other times they took the pattern off the inside of a pot, which is run a wee bit small. None of them really fit like they're supposed to.
That's like aftermarket body parts when we was in the collision centers. They go, well, these going to fit? I'm like, let me tell you something. The die that they're stamping these things out with was good for X amount of units. They sell those units overseas, those dies, and then they proceed to stamp out more body parts.
Yeah.
Another 500,000. Then when they're done with that 500,000, they hit it with some PAM and stamp out another 500,000. So as the run they do gets more and more down the line. So
The curves get softer, the details get looser.
the first round where they had everything tested to QS 9000 specs,
Yeah.
that may fit, but 500,000 rounds later, no.
As the Brits would also say, it'll take a mite bit of fettling to make this fit.
It's going to take more than that. It's like some alum and never mind.
Aluminium.
No, alum. Isn't the alum the thing makes things like
Oh, you're talking about alum like when you have a cold sore that makes you...
exactly.
Yeah.
That's what. I'm glad someone got that. Hey, you know what though? In all honesty, though, I think we have gone very long on this show.
We have, and feel free to edit. There's quite a few little bumps in there. So, folks, I hope you haven't been totally thrown off by this, but, we'd be interested to know, what is your ideal Jeep? Is it a make? Is it a year? A model? A style? Or is it a concept? We're okay with all that. We've told you what ours are, and for certain situations, it's a different Jeep. In your case, it's two different Jeeps.
Yeah.
In mine, well, it's a Jeep and a few other vehicles bouncing around here.
Yeah. My dream garage would have the CJ, like John Carl's, a Willys wagon,
Okay.
my LJ,
Yep.
the Gladiator, and a TJ truck conversion,
Yeah.
flatbed.
Well, and as weird as it sounds, my TJ'd still be there.
Yeah.
I might do the TJ pickup conversion yet, but it might be on that TJ, on slightly altered, because it'll be slightly altered a bit more. And then it might be a few non-Jeep items,
Yeah.
and a couple of resto mods in other realms that are hiding around in the closet and in the books, because I do love my two-seat sports cars, and I don't have mine anymore. And I miss the ability to, change lanes under the belly of a semi-truck.
Okay,
not
Clark
literally,
Griswold.
not literally, folks. But
He just watched National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation.
No,
That's why he got the.
no, I used to have a British Racing Edition MX-5
Yeah.
that was unbelievable. People are like, that's a chick car. I'm like, okay,
Fine.
fine. They're like, what do you mean? Get in, sit down, buckle up, hold on, shut up. 174 horse in 1,900 pounds, 2,000 with a heavy passenger in it,
Yeah.
with 50-50 weight balance and grippy tires, was unreal.
It was fun.
It was
You had Zoom Zoom.
Oh, I had zoom, serious zoom. There are some certain, you know how Han Solo made the
The parsec run in 12 parsecs.
yes. I made the
Kessel run in 12
the
parsecs.
Kessel run
Oh
in
my
12
God.
parsecs. Yes,
I just lost my street cred.
and I happened to make the Miami run in under 4 hours.
Yeah, without a police escort.
So-
Literally under the radar. Moving on because the statute.
Well, that's
of
the whole
limit-
thing about sitting that low is you kind of under, when you go past the your speed is signs and it stays 0 or blank because it can't read you. I don't know if you're going to get a speeding ticket or a citation for flying too low.
Just reminds me of the old video game where it was called Road Rash, where you racing over there, and they would cut scenes to like when you got caught, the state trooper walking up to you. And I remember one in particular. It gets out, usually when you're driving the Italian sports cars, they go, "I do believe I got myself my first UFO."
And on that note, I think we're going to go back to the Jeep world where
Yes.
it's 0 to 60 eventually.
Especially in a YJ 4-cylinder.
Downhill with a tailwind.
Yeah, really. Hey, on that note, everyone, seriously though, have a happy and safe New Year,
And Christmas,
and Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays.
I always say Cherry Missmas and a Yappy Hoonier.
Absolutely. So whatever holiday you celebrate, have a safe one.
Yes.
We're almost done with 2020. We have 15 days left, 16 days left until the clock rolls over to 13/1/20.
Yes. He keeps trying. He keeps trying. You know, I see smoke coming off the top of his head.
It's been a long day.
It has. But anyhow, folks, we appreciate your time. You're listening. It wouldn't be much of a podcast without you.
Nope.
So as we say many, many times, time enough. Let's put her lockups, put her in 4-low, and hit the trail.
And remember always to will legal, tread lightly, take nothing but pictures, memories, and your trash when you leave the trail. And I got it right. Yes, last one of the
Yes.
year.
We obviously want to leave our trails open for our children and our children's children, because if we don't take care of them, who will?
Exactly. So, bye.
Bye. See you next year.
You got me. Darn it. Later.
Proceeding has been provided for entertainment only. Proper service and repair procedures are vital to the safe, reliable operation of all motor vehicles, as well as personal safety of those performing those repairs. Standard safety procedures and precaution, including the use of safety goggles and proper tools and equipment, should be followed at all times to eliminate the possibility of personal injury or improper service which could damage the vehicle or compromise its safety.
What he said. Thanks a lot for listening, guys. You guys have a great day.
Bye.
This has been a Ben Axel Media production.